Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. After freezing all funds to the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, the Trump administration has just announced another bombshell change in its Middle East policy. The White House has officially closed the P.L.O's offices in Washington, D.C., accusing the Palestinians of ceasing to pursue a meaningful peace with Israel. Staffers in the D.C. office have been given notice that they have 1 month to leave the premises, effective immediately. This is the latest and possibly most severe move by Team Trump with reference to the Palestinians as of late. Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, have largely hailed these efforts, though. After learning that the P.L.O's office was being closed for good, Netanyahu issued the statement, quote, "The United States made the correct decision regarding the P.L.O. mission in Washington. Israel supports American actions that are designed to make it clear to the Palestinians that refusing to negotiate and attempts to attack Israel in international forums will not advance peace," end quote. This decision also comes just a few days after the Trump administration cut some $25 million in aid monies that was being used to fund Palestinian hospitals in East Jerusalem. For Palestinian leaders, the writing is on the wall. Most have unanimously declared the United States an enemy of the Palestinian people, a war chant that first started last year with Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Following that decision, the Palestinians largely withdrew from negotiations with the United States. The White House retaliated with a series of budget cuts that ultimately led to the total freezing of all funds to the UNRWA and the news that Trump's team was seeking an end to the Palestinians' unique status as a refugee people. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is reportedly considering severing all ties, including pivotal security communications with the United States, following the closure of the P.L.O's offices. For now, it remains to be seen whether these tactics will ultimately force the Palestinians back to the negotiating table or not. Palestinian leaders have just officially filed a claim of war crimes against Israel at the International Criminal Court, also known as the ICC. This is ostensibly the highest-level court system in the world, tasked with investigating potential war crimes committed by foreign governments. In this case, the Palestinians are urging the ICC to investigate Israel's plan to demolish a Bedouin village in the West Bank, one which the state claims was illegally built. The village in question, SHANAH, was officially greenlit for demolition earlier this month following the High Court's go-ahead. This particular village has been mired in legal red tape for years now, with both sides bitterly fighting in court. The 173 Bedouin who lived in the village are said to originally be from a Negev village in southern Israel. The State of Israel relocated them to the Palestinian West Bank sometime in the 1950s, where the families have remained ever since. Several years ago, the residents began erecting makeshift tents to live in, and Israeli officials say these structures were built illegally without Israeli permission or permits. But the residents argue that they had no other option and nowhere else to go, considering the state originally evicted them in the first place with no resettlement option. Israel has received considerable pressure to reverse the demolition order following the High Court's decision earlier this month, and the chief negotiator of the Palestinians, Boycott, says that such a demolition constitutes war crimes, a matter that will now be left to the ICC over whether or not to investigate. United States National Security Advisor John Bolton has threatened the ICC not to attack America's allies on the global stage. Bolton has slammed the courts for being ineffective, unaccountable, and indeed outright dangerous in the past. Despite major calls to boycott the event, resulting in the cancellations of Lana Del Rey, of Montreal, and others, Israel's Meteor Music Festival kicked off last weekend. But even before the first band could hit the stage, yet another call for boycott has been released. Over 140 artists across various disciplines all over the world have signed an open letter published by The Guardian, now calling for the boycott of the Eurovision Song Contest. The contest is reportedly set to begin in Tel Aviv in May of 2019, following the victory of Israel's Netta Barzilai in 2018. Most notably signing the letter is pronounced B.D.S. spokesman and Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters. Apart from Waters, 2 signed from the United States and 6 from Israel, but the majority of the undersigned come from Europe. Now, most of the time, artists come under fire by pro-Palestinian or BDS groups when they book a gig in Israel, but many of those have come anyway. Some, like Lord, Elvis Costello, and others, however, have succumbed to the pressures. Regardless, Eurovision 2019 faces other difficulties from within as well. Ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel are demanding that rehearsals, typically held on Saturdays, be rescheduled as to not interfere with the Sabbath. They're threatening early elections over this and Saturday railway work. Meanwhile, the European Broadcasting Union, which runs the song contest, has also sent a letter with their own demands. The EBU is demanding that the Khan broadcaster be given complete autonomy away from the government when airing the event, that any religious restrictions over the scheduling of the event be lifted, and that a government authority, ideally the Prime Minister himself, personally signed that these demands will be met. Well, as you probably know, Jews all over the world just celebrated Rosh Hashanah, otherwise known as the Jewish New Year. As the Hebrew calendar rolls over to the year 5779, the total number of Jews worldwide has also risen since last year. The Hebrew University says that there are nearly 14.7 million Jews living all over the world, with the majority living right here in the state of Israel. It probably comes as no surprise that Israel is the single largest home to Jews anywhere in the world. But here's a surprising statistic. There are actually more Jews living outside of Israel in the diaspora than those living inside. About 1.5 million more, in fact. 6.6 million Jews currently live in Israel, with 8.1 million Jews living outside of Israel, 5.7 million of whom live in the United States. Well, no matter where they live, millions of Jewish families were gathering Sunday night to celebrate the Jewish New Year with some apples and honey. Even the United Nations celebrated the festivity by recreating the ritual throwing of sins into the river, which in this case was New York's East River. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Dani Danon, led the ceremony, which would be followed by the Cheshbon HaNefesh ritual of soul-searching. Dozens of ambassadors, including UN Chief Antonio Guterres, were there to take part. The joy of Rosh Hashanah culminates next week with the Hebrew Yom Kippur holiday, one of the most solemn of the Jewish year, a day of reflecting and asking for atonement for our sins. From all of us at ILTV, we hope the new year is a sweet one for each and every one of you.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.